Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Now, I've been asked to do some swatch comparisons of some recent Charlotte Tilbury palettes and also another palette by Natasha Denona. I'm just looking around to make sure I've got them all with me. Now, if you like the look I've done today, I've actually done a look using this palette by McGRATH. And if you would like it, just leave a message down below and I'll do it in my live tomorrow, this look. Okay, so this is Natasha Denona on the eyes, and I'm wearing today Tell Laura by Charlotte Tilbury. Okay, I'll put all the details as well in the description bar. But let's get to these palettes. So I had two requests. I'm not even going to try and remember their names. You know I'm awful. I'll do a little shout out over voiceover. Okay, so I've looked it up now. So it's a big shout out to Debora Spolaor, I think you pronounce it. So she asked for the swatch comparisons of the Sunset palette and the Pillow Talk palette of pops. And then Rose Gold asked for the comparison with the new Starry Eyes to Hypnotise palette. So thank you both for the requests. And just a reminder to everyone, if you have any requests for swatch comparisons, do let me know and I will try it and oblige. But I had two requests, and one was, could I compare Charlotte Darling Palette with the new Starry Eyes to Hypnotise? That was one request. And the other request I had was from the same lady who asked if I could compare the new Charlotte Darling palette to the Pillow Talk palette of pops, which I think that's the wrong one, but don't worry, I've got it here. The Pillow Talk palette of pops, and also Natasha Denona's Sunset palette. So let's get swatching, shall we? And I also thought I might throw in a few other things to compare it to, just to help you in your purchasing, because I know there's a lot of new products that have come out recently. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so first on in, you know that I don't have the Charlotte Darling palette, but I do have all the colours because they're in Stars in Your Eyes and the Dolce Vita, otherwise known as the Bella Sofia palette. So I'm just going to swatch these on my arm first, and then we will get into doing some comparisons. So first of all, the first shade in Charlotte Darling palette is the prime shade from the Bella Sofia palette. So I'm just going to put that here and I'm going to show you what that looks like here. And don't worry, because picture swatches will be coming up shortly. Okay, and then we have the Enhance and Smoke shade from Love Eyes in the Stars in Your Eyes palette, which is this one here. Okay, so let me just, so that you're not looking at the mirror. So we have these two shades here and these three shades here. So I'm going to swatch those for you, and that will make up the Charlotte Darling palette. Now, I've also been told that this is the same as the Nordstrom palette, but I don't have that to compare it to. But other people from the States have actually swatched them together and confirmed that that is the case. So I'm just swatching all these shades for you so that you can see all the shades from the Charlotte Darling palette. Okay, so there are all the shades on my arm, and I'm just going to leave a photograph here. Okay, so next on in, the next question was, is it similar to any of the shades in the new Starry Eyes to Hypnotise? And what a great question. And I haven't even had a chance to look at this yet. So I'm just going to show you Starry Eyes to Hypnotise. And I think I'll be heading for these shades here, because these look like the most similar to me. So I'm just going to swatch those, and I'm going to tell you which ones I think look the most similar. Okay, I'm going to swatch them on the other arm. So I'm going to go in and look at the prime shade of Love Glow from the Starry Eyes to Hypnotise, first of all. And I would say that that is a little bit darker than the prime shade of Charlotte Darling. So that, I'm going to put them next to one another in the photo coming up. So don't worry, okay? And then we have the enhanced shade of Love Glow in Starry Eyes to Hypnotise. And that looks quite similar to the fourth shade in the Charlotte Darling palette, except the fourth shade has got a little bit more red tone. So there is the enhanced shade of the Starry Eyes to Hypnotise, and here is the fourth shade of Charlotte Darling. Don't worry, I will put the photos next to one another in a minute. And then we have the smoke shade. Now the smoke shade I don't think is similar because it is more of a burgundy shade, which is there. And there aren't really any burgundy matte shades in that palette. But I'm just going to take a look, because when I think burgundy, what I definitely think of is her new instant look in her palette. So let me just get that for a minute. Okay, so the smoke shade in Love Glow is very similar to the smoke shade in the new instant look in a palette. Here is the one I'm talking about. And if you look at the smoke shades together, you'll see that they look quite similar. The one in Love Glow, Starry Eyes, to Hypnotise, is a little bit more redder, but you can see that they look quite similar. Okay, so that's the comparisons there. Now we want to move on. I will put some pictures there for you to have a look at, and then we will move on to Pillow Talk Palette of Pops. Okay, so next on I was asked to compare the Pillow Talk Palette of Pops with the Charlotte Darling, which is still there on my arm. Okay, so I'm just going to compare those for you. So first on, we'll look at the prime shade. And again, I'll put these side by side in a photo in between. Okay, so the prime shade of the Palette of Pops is very similar actually to the first shade in Charlotte Darling. So let's now move on to the enhanced shade. And now this has got a lot of sparkle to it. It's a Palette of Pops, so it's bound to be sparkly. And I'm just looking at it, and I would say not really, because it's quite a pink shade, and there isn't anything that's very pink there. They're sort of more brownier shades. They've got more brown, warm. This is more pink. So not really to that one. Then we will move on to the gorgeous smoke shade in Pillow Talk Palette of Pops, which I love. And again, I'm looking at it. And what I would say about the smoke shade of the Palette of Pops is it's like a pop version of the matte, the very darkest shade in Charlotte Tilbury, but that is matte. Okay, so this one is a lot more shimmery, and it's got the kind of formula of a pop shade. Similar colour, but this is matte. This is a lot more pigmented and a lot more shimmery, like a pop shade. And then last on in, we have the Pop Pop. And I'm going to swatch that one, and I'm just looking, and I would say that the pop shade is quite similar. There's the second shade in Charlotte Darling. There is the second shade. There is the pop shade in Pillow Talk palette of pops. And again, I'm going to leave you the photos side by side for you to compare here. Okay, so now looking at the Sunset palette by Natasha Denona. And again, I'm sort of drawn to looking at these ones because this is the kind of tones that are in the Charlotte Darling palette. So I'm just going to have a look on my arm, and I would say that Azalea is looking pretty close. So I'm just going to go in and swatch Azalea and have a look. It's pretty close, but Azalea is a lot more orange toned than any of these. These are kind of got more red in them. And then I'm going to look at Morgan, because Morgan looks like it could be the third shade, matte shade. Okay, so there is Morgan, and I would say it's similar-ish, but this again, it's got more red, brown in it. This is far more orange toned. And I can't really see anything else that is, let me just have a look at Awakening. My last shade to look at is Awakening. No, Awakening is too pink. What I would say in summary about this is that you've got, in the Sunset palette, you've got a lot of purples and oranges, but they are very much designed to be spring summer shades. So these actually have a lot more of an orange overtone, and these have got a lot more of a pink overtone. Whereas with the Charlotte Darling palette, what you're getting is a lot more warm russet brown, autumn, full undertone. And it will really show up, I think, when you combine the colours. So I don't think you will be doubling up too much if you've got the Sunset palette and you want to go for Charlotte Darling. Now, let me just recap on the last two. I think you've got a couple of similar shades in Love Glow from the Starry Eyes to Hypnotise palette. But other than that, the rest are all quite different. So it's really only in this look that you've got similar-ish shades. And I don't think they're, apart from that middle shade, which is probably very similar, I don't think, given that you've got 3, 6, 9, and these couple of shades each side, I don't think you're going to feel like you've doubled up too much if you get the Charlotte Darling palette and you already have this. And with the Pillow Talk, what I would say with the Pillow Talk palette of pops, I keep getting Celestial Eyes instead, which, by the way, I've checked and it doesn't compare. With the Pillow Talk palette of pops, they are again on a similar spectrum, but I think what would be really nice if you've got the Pillow Talk palette of pops is to use them as toppers over these shades, because these are a very different formula. So they've got a lot more emollients in them and a lot more sparkle, whereas these are still very emollient, but they're not going to be as sparkly. So again, I think if you had these two, you wouldn't regret it, because I think you combine them a lot. So maybe wearing the Charlotte Darling palette in the day and then pepping it up at night with your Pillow Talk palette of pops. So I hope you've enjoyed this comparison. Do join me tomorrow at 1 o'clock if you want, I will do this look for you using the McGRATH palette in the description bar below, and this red lip look. And who knows, I might have some new products to show you by tomorrow. So take care. Have a lovely day, everyone. I'm just off to wipe some swatches off before I go and pick Jack up from school. Take care. Love you all. Mwah! Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. French manicure nails.